All right, let's get comfy, let's get cozy. I think we're lopsided here. Hold on. Nobody say a single word about my hair. I hate it today. I don't know why I straightened it. I very rarely straighten my hair now. I am not happy. I read 6 books this month. 2 of them were physical copies, 4 of them were audiobooks, 3 of them were 5-star books. One of them, well, I guess technically I read 7 books. One of them I DNF'd. One of them was on Kindle Unlimited, but I also listened to it on Audible. It was free. And I'm gonna tell you what I thought of each one. I also am keeping a reading journal and literally have like a wrap-up section so I can remember what to talk about in these videos. You know, we're gonna get the DNF'd book out of the way, Beautiful Bastard. I randomly picked this up at Barnes & Noble. I had never heard of it before. I think it was on the romance table or maybe the book talk table. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know, but it was an impulse buy and I wish I had not picked it up. It was a waste of $16.99. I only got through the first 100 pages and then I decided to stop reading it because the characters were irritating. I did not find the story believable. It was the kind of enemies to lovers trope that just like make my blood boil. I don't mind enemies to lovers, but I think it has to be written where you can still feel the chemistry and the tension. And this truly felt like 2 people really hated each other and just kept repeating that they hated each other and then would have sex every chance they got. I also didn't believe the power dynamic in this story. It's a boss and his assistant, and I don't know, I pictured the male character as somebody very young, and maybe it's because I'm 30. I just didn't believe it. I didn't believe that this random 23-year-old was some incredible CEO that the assistant wanted to sleep with. I literally hate that I own this. All right, next, the 2 physical copies that I read. Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail. This is the 2nd book in the Bright Falls series. The first one is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. I loved that book and I knew I wanted to pick this one up. Astrid's character is briefly mentioned in the first book, and I think it's going to deter a lot of people from picking up this book because she's not very likable. The story follows Astrid and Jordan, who have an unlikely, not so fun meeting at a coffee shop, and then they realize they are forced to work together on an interior design renovation project. They do become friends, and obviously it is a romance, so you can imagine what happens next. I don't even think the word bisexual was mentioned in this book. It's just not taboo. Like the story of a woman, Astrid, who was previously engaged to a man, now being with a woman, like no one made it feel weird, and the storyline wasn't focused around Astrid realizing that she could be bisexual. I also feel like the spice in this book was really well done. It has some of the best like LGBT spicy scenes, and I truly think that's because it was written by a woman. I don't know if she, okay, her author like bio in the back doesn't specify, but I would be very surprised if this was a straight woman. It's not like over sexualized, which I really appreciated, and I feel like this author does a good job at diversifying her characters and not just making the same cookie cutter super femme bisexual and more androgynous woman. I think there's a nice mix in her characters. I rated this 4 stars, I think. Next, Loath to Love You. This is technically 3 novellas in 1 book. Also, don't come for me about this sticker. I can't get it off. I hate this. Oh, also, look at what I got here. Look, I got a stamp that says, "From the Library of Rhiannon McVeigh." Look at it. Incredible. Anyway, Loath to Love You. I finished Under One Roof yesterday, actually, and I'm forcing myself not to finish the next one so it can be in my February reads video. It was super cute. I think it was only like 12 chapters, so it's a really fast, easy read. And Ali Hazelwood is an author that I know I love, so I was very excited when I saw this at Target the other day. Under One Roof follows Liam and Mara, 2 people who are forced to cohabitate because they both own the same house. Mara has been inherited 1/2 of the house. Is inherited the right word? Mara has inherited half of the house from her mentor who recently passed away. So it's a little bit of enemies to lovers. I also really appreciate an author who can create strong characters in a novella. I think sometimes when you don't have a lot of time, the character development can be lacking, but these were well-rounded characters and I really, really liked it. I rated it 3.5 stars. The one thing that made it not a 4 or 5 star read for me is once you got to the climax of the story, that's when it was done. Literally, I turned the page and it was like epilogue. I don't know, I just expected something more, but I think that's always going to be my complaints with novellas, especially when I enjoy the characters and I enjoy the story. I want to see how they grow in a full book. I also really wish that they had explored Liam's sexuality a little bit more. It came off like this might have been his first spicy encounter. I'm not really sure. But either way, I do recommend it. 3.5 stars. I'm excited to read the next 2. Okay, before we move on to these guys, you guys already know that I love these. I decided to reread them, but I'm listening to the graphic audios. We're gonna go over the other audiobook that I listened to in January. Well-Behaved Wives is a book on Kindle Unlimited, and if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription, you can listen to the audiobook on Audible for free. It is set in the early 60s, and it follows 2 women, so it's dual point of view. Ruth, and I can't remember the second character's name, but Ruth is a new wife. She's young, she just got married, and she is now living with her husband and her in-laws, and it kind of follows a couple weeks with her in-laws where she is taking etiquette classes, which essentially is like a disguise for like how to be a good wife classes, and she's really struggling with how to start being a wife in the 60s while also keeping her independence. She's also a lawyer and just finished law school. And the story kind of follows her figuring out how to balance those two, but then you also see how domestic violence was handled in the 60s, and I really, really enjoyed how this book ended. I think I would call it a happy ending, but it was a realistic ending, and I really appreciated that. Now back to the graphic audios of Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I have completely finished A Court of Thorns and Roses and half of A Court of Mist and Fury. If you've been following along with everything I read for the past 2 years, you know that I have already finished these books. I am on A Court of Silver Flames, and I just refuse to finish the last couple chapters because I love Nesta so much that I just can't imagine being done with that story. It like hurts a little bit to think about. But I decided to reread these because I loved the graphic audio of A Court of Thorns and Roses so much that I knew I wanted to buy the other ones. So when I started A Court of Thorns and Roses last year, I knew that I really struggled with fantasy books. And so I decided to get the graphic audio so I could listen and like learn the characters' names and learn the world while also having the physical copy that I could like reference, if that makes sense. I highly recommend that you do this. Even if you're not really into audiobooks or you are a more intermediate fantasy reader, I still think the dramatized audios on Audible are really fun to listen to. They have a full cast, so you have a voice for every single character, and there's music and there's sound effects. It really does feel like your eyes are just closed and you're listening to a movie. I think every audiobook should be like that. Court of Thorns and Roses, I highly recommend. I think everybody knows what this book is about, but if you do not, it is a loose retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it is kind of the introduction to Prythian, the world that is cultivated in the Sarah J. Maas universe. It follows 19-year-old Farah, who is taken to Prythian after she accidentally kills a fairy, and she falls in love with the High Lord of the Spring Court. And then she is put to the test, essentially, to win his love and break the curse on Prythian. And then that takes us to the second book, where we are introduced to the Night Court and the High Lord of the Night Court. This book is probably my favorite because it completely takes you out of not this world, but just like this little sliver of the world, and introduces you to a ton of new characters. So it's almost like a completely new fantasy book, but it's really just an expansion of the world that has started in A Court of Thorns and Roses. I also really like how this book is focused on themes that we actually see in real life. So healing, growth for the characters, discussing PTSD, just seeing a lot of healing for most of the characters in this book. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. If you're interested in seeing the inside of my reading journal, let me know and I can do like a little flip through. I make little pages like this. I also have a flip through on my TikTok if you don't want to wait for a longer version on YouTube. All right, those are all the books that I read in January. I will be back in February to tell you what I read. All right, I will see you guys next month.